Opportunities in the Marketplace by Victor Yap and Doris Mock. Chapter 30. The Rich and the Employee. Rich People, Right Treatment. James 5, 1-6. Here are some of the wiser quotes on the rich and the poor on the internet. The rich get richer and the poor get children. John Brunner. No matter how rich or poor you are, all life will come to a halt with two types of destinations: heaven and hell. Callum Illman. History is written by the rich, and so the poor get blamed for everything. Jeffrey D. Sachs. If you are born poor, it's not your mistake, but if you die poor, it is your mistake. Bill Gates. Life is a dream for the wise, a game for the fool, a comedy for the rich, a tragedy for the poor. Sholem Aleichem. Rich people have small TVs and big libraries, and poor people have small libraries and big TVs. Zig Ziglar. A rich man is nothing but a poor man with money. The poor walk miles to get food, and the rich walk miles to digest food. Without love, the rich and poor live in the same house. You are not poor because someone else is wealthy. Hong Kong, where I live, has the highest income gap between the rich and the poor of any developed economy in the world. The top 10% earn 29 times more than that of the poorest 10%, Oxfam reports. In other words, the latter has to work 2 years and 5 months in order to earn what the top 10% earns in a single month. In Hong Kong, the poverty line is set at Hong Kong dollars 3,275 or US $420 per month, 50% of the median income. Following this standard, 1 in 5 people live in poverty. What kind of responsibility does the Lord expect from those with power and privilege? How can owners make a difference with their riches and resources? What can the downtrodden and the deprived do in their despair? First, find the appropriate feelings. Verse 1. Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming on you. When the unpopular Henry III, an oppressing prince, sent a load of clothing material to the friar miners to clothe them, they returned the same with this message, that he ought not to give alms of what he had rent from the poor, neither would they accept of that abominable gift. John Trapp. There is no consensus to the rich that James targeted in this chapter. Rich Jewish believers, Gentiles, or unbelieving and wicked men, chaff in general. The Bible is not against having riches, but against trusting in wealth, boasting in the multitude of riches, Psalm 49:6, trusting in the abundance of one's riches, Psalms 52:7, obtaining riches not unjustly, Jeremiah 17:11. 5 times the Bible warned against trusting in riches, Psalms 52:7, Proverbs 11:28, Mark 10:24, and 1 Timothy 6:17. Proverbs says, "The rich and poor meet together. The Lord is the maker of them all." Proverbs 22:2. Oxfam claims that in 2016, the richest 62 people own half of the world's wealth. Yet in 2017, I heard that 10% of the congregation in our church bear 45% of the offering. Verse 1 begins with 2 imperatives: listen and weep. The rich, missing in older manuscripts in the Bible, are not softly challenged, counseled, countered, and corrected, but strongly cautioned, criticized, chided, and confronted, because the verb listen and go is an imperative, a command, or a charge. The verb means going, leading, and heading. James asked the rich, what's the future? What's to follow? What is forthcoming? The second imperative is weep. It is translated also as bewail, Revelation 18:9. It is to weep and wail, to cry out rather than cry, with heart-breaking, gut-wrenching, and tear-jerking distress rather than sobbing, sniffing, and straining. It warns of haunting, horrific, and harmful passion and pain. The noun misery occurs only twice in the Bible, but unlike the other instance in Romans 3:16, which is singular, this misery is plural. It does not mean moderate, but much wretchedness, woefulness, and weightiness. The noun literally spells of heaviness rather than heartache, encumbrance rather than emotion, a balance and a bulk rather than the blues. The verb coming is in the present tense, not the future. The tribulations, trappings, and tears are a present, permanent, and prominent reality, not a just projected, proposed, or promised. The cost, consequences, and condemnation would be greater than the power, profit, and prosperity acquired by the rich by depriving, defrauding, and destroying the poor. Second, fix the atrocious flaw. Verse 2 and 3. Your wealth has rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. There was a king whose officers in the midst of battle decided to go and take food that was desperately needed from some homes in the area. When they came back with it, the king asked, "Did you pay them for what they took?" They said, "No, the king doesn't have to pay." The wise king said, "Go back and pay them for everything that you took." The king, to his credit, knew that a taking king is a tyrant, but a benevolent king is beloved. Two important words in verse 4 occur for its only time in the Bible: rot and moth-eaten. King James Version. Rot means decay, decompose, deteriorate, and decline. It means losing, lessening, or lacking in value and virtue. The next verb, moths have eaten, or moth-eaten in King James Version, means insect, bed, and breakfast, food and feast, diet and drink. Rot is a pollution, and moth-eaten refers to pest. One becomes trash and the other treasure to bugs. One is garbage and the other grub. One is compost and the other is consumption. The next word, corrode, verse 3, means rusted. It could mean dissolved, discolored, defaced literally. Its surface, substance, and shine are gone for good, leaving stain, smell, and slush in its wake and waste. Testify, verse 3, means eyewitness, evidence, exhibit, and expert testimony. It means submit proven, pointed, and powerful facts, findings, and forensics against the rich. Eat, verse 3, means digest, devour, and damage. It will burn, blaze, bite, and burrow into your flesh, frame, body, and bone, skin, and substance. Here are some contrasts: rot, moth-eaten, rust; witness, eat; capital, creatures, chemistry, court, consumption; devalued, devoured, decomposed, decided, devastated; financial, biological, chemical, legal, personal, or flesh; insolvent, infestation, ignited, indictment, injured; wear, worm, warning, witness, wound; polluted, penetrated, poisoned, prosecuted, pained. The conclusion is from bank to body, from finance to flesh, and from one's savings to one's skin. The biggest loser is the unfeeling, unsympathetic, and uncaring rich. Third, fear the advancing fury, verses 4 to 6. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the innocent one who was not opposing you. Many newspapers often report how rich nations give generously of their wealth to the poorer nations to help them eradicate poverty and improve their economy, up to $125 billion or 102 billion pounds in aid each year to prove their benevolent goodwill. The US-based Global Financial Integrity, GFI, and the Center for Applied Research at the Norwegian School of Economics, however, had published some interesting data. They tallied up all of the financial resources that get transferred between rich countries and poor countries each year, not just aid, foreign investment, and trade flows, as previous studies have done, but also non-financial transfers such as debt cancellation, unrequited transfers like workers' remittances, and unrecorded capital flight to tax refuge countries. In 2012, the last year of recorded data, developing countries received a total of $1.3 trillion, including all aid, investment, and income from abroad. But that same year, some $3.3 trillion flowed out of them. In other words, developing countries sent $2 trillion more to the rest of the world than they received. If we look at all years since 1980, these net outflows add up to an eye-popping total of $16.3 trillion, roughly the GDP of United States. Developing countries have forked out over $4.2 trillion in interest payments alone since 1980, a direct cash transfer to big banks in New York and London on a scale that dwarfs the aid that they received during the same period. Another big contributor is the income that foreigners make on their investments in developing countries and then repatriate back home. In Hong Kong, it is no joke that people living in tiny subdivided flats of 30 square feet pay 4,000 Hong Kong dollars monthly, which is more expensive per square feet than the rich in their mid-level homes. The Pope once told the story of the death of a miser. The people joked. The funeral was ruined, they said. They couldn't close the coffin because he wanted to take all that he had with him and he couldn't. The first part is the owner's relationship with the laborers. Woe to you is a prophetic mode of speaking, Calvin, of divine, dreadful, deliberate, and decisive judgment. Verse 4 concerns the workers, their wages, and their weariness. The verb cry is more than cry. It is an outcry. It is more shout than say, more clamor than call. It is roaring, resounding, and ricocheting, with rings of repercussion and redress, and never of reticence or refrain. The rich masters gave the poor man little or no remuneration, rest, and recovery. I once heard a lady who said this of her daughter, who worked for one of the biggest banks in Hong Kong. She gets to work, but could not get off work. The second part is the owner's relationship with the Lord. The sins of the owners have reached or entered into the ears of the Lord Almighty. Not just reached, but entered in Greek. Not just hear, but heed. Not listen to, but look into. Not merely into the house, but into the heart. Here are the contrasts to verse 5. Lived in luxury, verb, live in indulgence, fattened, indulgent, immoral, indecent, infringement, intrusion, opulence, hearts, pamper, perverse, plunder, ease, error, exploitation. full, faulty, fat, spoilt, sinful, surplus. The rich man's depraved, decadent, and disgraceful lifestyle in verse 5, however, was detrimental, damaging, and even deadly to others. The cost, consequences, and casualties, however, were not counted to the rich but to others. Condemned, or katadikazo, is more than words. It is to pronounce, proclaim, or paint a person as guilty, unrighteous, and worse. The prefix kata is against the verb dikazo. Is righteous implied to undo, undermine, and undercut a person. Condemned and murder is before and after relationship, the action and the aftermath, from worse to worst, from demoralizing to deadly. Conclusion. The rich have advantages, assets, and additions beyond their need. So the last thing the rich need is the condemnation of their heart, their souls, and conscience. Do you see the need of others? Seek their welfare and share your wealth. Do you treat others morally, magnanimously, and mercifully? Let our greatest benefit and reward be in the riches of his goodness, Romans 2:4, the riches of his grace, Ephesians 1:7 and 2:7, and the riches of his glory, Romans 9:23 and Ephesians 3:16. Bible study questions. 1. What are the two things the rich people in James's day commanded to do? What will be their fate? Verse 1. 2. Fill in the richest resources and their results below. Verse 2, and verse 3. What was James' conclusion? Verse 3. 3. What mistreatment did the laborers face, and what redress did they have? Did anyone hear them? Verse 4. 4. How did the rich live? Verse 5. 5. How did the rich use their power and privilege? What did the poor do? Verse 6. 6. Did the rich appear penitent? Summarize actions and attitudes of the wealthy and the answers and alternatives available of their workers. Personal application. 1. Who is rich before God? Do you have a concrete example? 2. As a disciple of the Lord, how do you handle money? Is distributing it to the poor a challenge to you? Does it make you sad? Why? 3. Facing the crisis and tests of life, how can we trust and obey God, meditate on God's protection, and trust your current difficulties to God and wait for his guidance? How are we to pass the test of faith? How do trials make a person's faith more mature? 4. If you have not experienced any suffering, are you willing to rely on the Lord to walk his way, follow his footsteps, and bear the sufferings? Pray to him in response to God's call. 5. For the needs of others, do you offer the Lord's mercy on them? Do you generally use practical methods to help others? Or do you believe that God has other ways to help them or special ways to use you? Why? 6. How has this lesson helped you as a disciple of Christ to understand your role, identity, participation, influence, and relationship with others in the marketplace?